Hello, everyone. This is yet another one in my series of sponsor spotlights. And today I have with me Shamika Allen Lane from Catalyst Event Coaching. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, and I'm continuing to highlight my sponsors, and she is what do you call yourself? The CEO?
It's so funny. I always have a hard time with CEO, but I say founder most often.
All right, awesome. So you are the founder
Yes.
of Catalyst Event Coaching. Awesome. All right, why don't you start with your name? How did you come up with your business name?
Sure. So I always have a hard time of how I'm going to tell the story, but basically it was given to me. It was a divinely inspired name. Catalyst, most people probably recognize is a chemical term. And when it was given to me, it was something that I wanted to shy away from because I feel like it's used so much. Like I actually go to a spa called Catalyst. And I just see it so often. And so I was not excited to use it. However, given my background, I am formally educated as a chemist. And so when I started really thinking about everything with it, I was like, you know what? It actually fits me. I'm not upset about it. We're going to go with it because it is uniquely me. It's not something that I was doing because I thought was the end thing to do. So with catalyst being a chemical term, it's basically speeding up the process without changing the chemical properties. And so that's essentially what I feel my business does as well. So it's an ode to my chemistry background while also saying that in my business, I can be the catalyst for your events, the seamless, effective events.
All right, so you were receiving a lot of different inspirations all around you.
Yes.
And tell us more about your business. What do you do? What do you offer? All that good stuff.
Sure. So with my business, it actually came from the idea of me being in events for many years. I've been in the events industry for about 15 years. A lot of that time was actually spent on the venue side and working with hotels. And doing that, you get an opportunity to see all sorts of different types of groups come in, what their important values are, what they're looking to do for their attendees, all of that good stuff. So I get a good diversified observation. And some of the things that I saw that were very common was that I was educating a lot of people if they were not formally educated or experienced event professionals. And so I spent a lot of time educating people. Those that took the time to listen, you could just see the light bulb go off for them, and it just warmed my heart. So that's part of why I started the business. But in terms of the services, we are a event education first company, meaning that we spend time working with people, training them and teaching them the concepts behind events, the logistics, management, budgeting, all those things that go with events. So we spend time with them on that. And that comes in different forms. That can come into workshops, that can come into customizing things for that particular organization or company. So that's one of the main things, one of the first things that we offer. Others is event management and consulting options. And so right now with everything that's been going on with the pandemic, I know sometimes people like to avoid that word, but everything that's going on with that, there was a shift in terms of what we were planning to do. And there has been a pretty big focus around events, digital events. So I have personally been working on a lot of digital events. That was not my forte before, but it is now. So I work with a lot of virtual events that I actually produce or help people to set up. I actually coach people around that as well. And same thing with in-person events. So managing that process. And then sometimes people have a skill set that they can do or their team can do, but maybe there's something missing from that skill set. Maybe they aren't the greatest at negotiating and knowing what they can put on the table and what they can't. So they might bring me in just to do that piece of it, and then they're good and smooth selling from there. So it's a wide range, but what I would say is the target. The main clients I work with is growing companies as well as nonprofits. At the end of the day, what I tell a lot of people is I help you execute your events at the intersection of profit and purpose. So that's the big takeaway.
All right, all right. So when you say events, what type of events?
So, with the main clients that I work with, which is growing companies, so more corporate based clients and nonprofits. So, those events usually range. Sometimes there's a couple of sprinkles of others in there, but what usually happens in that arena is going to be conferences, it's going to be meetings, trainings, retreats, fundraising events. Those are the bulk of the types of events that I usually work with. But every now and then, there are some other sprinkles of things that come into play for those clients.
So your area of expertise is more like professional events.
Correct. Correct.
So just to be clear, you don't do like personal events like birthday parties, weddings, things like that.
So those types of things, usually they don't reach out for a service that's like mine. And so that's not a part of my typical events that I work with. I definitely don't manage those, but I help walk people through that if they need assistance with where do I go to get this type of vendor, from a cost perspective, what's going to be the most cost effective thing for me to do. I can lend a helping hand around those things for that type of event.
All right. So you do work with those events. You just haven't worked with a lot of them. Is that right?
Right. So, because at the end of the day, a lot of what I do is around purpose and logistics. And so those fit better with the other events that I mentioned. But a quick funny story, I tell people sometimes to give an example. So it's one of my examples to talk about birthday parties, right? So when people do a birthday celebration, because for me, one of the first things I do when helping a client, I go back to the purpose of the event. So that's how we know we have a successful event, if we're tuned in to what the purpose is and if we're meeting those purposes. And so for a birthday party, most people say I'm doing it to celebrate my birthday, but the reality is most aren't. That's the excuse that they're using to do it. That's the motivation of this is the best day to pick for this event. That's the incentive. But a lot of times it may be because they want to get their loved ones together. It may be because there's something that they have been wanting to do and they couldn't pick another time to do it. They just wanted to have a reason to do it. So there's different reasons why people do these birthday celebrations. Birthday is a good excuse to do it, but it's not the real reason why they're doing it. And so I work with people usually around that because it's difficult for them to a lot of times stay focused on whatever the purpose is for the event and not go over budget. Because that's the other thing that I push very heavily is making sure that you're not going over your budget. And if traditionally in corporate events as well as nonprofits, you want to make sure that there's an ROI that's involved. So when it's a personal event, it's not as much of an ROI, but it's definitely still, you want to be in line with your budget. So I can assist with those things. It's not often that I do, but obviously when you work with certain clients and they enjoy you, they want to bring you on for those other events as well. So there are times that I work with people on them.
Sorry, when you say ROI, what is that?
That is return on investment. That's a great question.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So return on investment is basically, if people have heard the term break even, and those concepts, they're associated. So essentially what return on investment does is you're thinking about the time, most often it's associated with money, but you're thinking about the cost, whether it's money, whether it's resources, whatever that is that you're actually dedicating towards this thing. And in my case, this event, what you're dedicating toward this event, is it worth it at the end of the day? And so when it's monetary, there are formulas or calculations that you can utilize to see exactly how much money, what percentage you will receive back from what you put in. And so the higher the ROI, the better, the reason why you want to do it. So if you can get an ROI that's going to give you 15 times what you put in, it's like, oh my gosh, this is hands down. We're not going to even think about it. We're going to do whatever this event or item is. And so that's the concept behind ROI. With things like nonprofit events, you want to at least break even. But at the end of the day, it's just like investing. You want to put your money in the item that is going to yield you the best results.
Okay, so pretty much you help organize events that have a clear purpose. So something like, like a fundraiser, for example. I want to raise money for my charity. So you help with the vendors and planning and the budgeting and organizing that. Did I get that?
Yes. So it's very similar to that. However, I will say that people usually have a purpose. They don't always know how clear it is because it's up to you how clear that purpose is. Even with fundraising, this is a conversation that happens often with a lot of nonprofits where they want to do a fundraiser and it's like, well, what is it for? For our nonprofit. People think that's enough. It's not. It's not enough. Even though it's a nonprofit, it's considered a charity. That is not enough. At the end of the day, people want to know, if I give you $20, is this going towards a scholarship? Is this going toward a specific program? What exactly is my money going towards? And so I like to actually work with people to help them hone into what their actual purpose is, because we all have the reasons. You just have to bring it out and make sure it's clear to you. So as you're going through the process, it will actually help you sort through what's important and what's not, because that's what we often confuse. And that's how our events kind of get away from us sometimes, as well as our budgets. Because if you're going back to, this is the goal, this is the purpose of the event, you'll start thinking, did I really need that? I don't know if I need that, because we're already over budget, and you're okay with cutting something because you know that it's not going to help you meet that end goal.
Okay, so so as part of the work that you do, you help people narrow down a purpose to
Correct.
to a specific goal,
Correct.
something that is tangible and realistic.
Correct. Absolutely.
Right. So you don't want people to say, I want to raise money for my charity. For example, you want something like, you want to raise money because I want to help. I want to help. I'm trying to think about it. I'm trying to help low income students get into college.
Right, right. You want to be specific. And the more specific you are, especially if you're a nonprofit, but the more specific that you are, you know what? I'll give you another example. Let me say this and I'll give you an example. The more specific you are, the better, because we've all heard stories about what nonprofits do with money. Some of them are very large nonprofits, some of them not so much. And people are weary of, am I going to give my money to this nonprofit? What are they going to do with it? Is it just for staffing? You know, are they going to take like, you don't know. And so the more specific they can give you as a reason as to why they're needing this money, what it's for, and even highlighting things around that purpose. So let's just say if it is giving scholarship opportunities to some people that have less resources financially or whatever the case is, if you can also tell about how you have done that in the past, what how it's helped those individuals, the impact it's had on their lives, that makes a difference, because people are like, oh, because a lot of times as it relates to nonprofits, people actually look at your results, and that's business too, but people look at your results to decide what they're going to do. So a quick story about the whole fundraising and nonprofit is that I did an exercise with my husband, where someone that we knew was actually doing a fundraiser. It was to buy a product, and 50% of the proceeds went towards that nonprofit. And I was like, okay, humor me, let's do this exercise. So I was like, how much did you spend? And he told me, and I said, if that person came to you outright and just said, we need money for X, would you have given them the money? And he was like, yes. I said, how much would you have given them? He told me that dollar amount. And at the end of the conversation of going back and forth, because I was asking him very specific things, he would have given them less money than he spent, but they would have got all of that money. That organization technically received less money directly for their needs from him because he was worried about buying the product, rather than he would have just given them about that same amount of money outright because of the purpose of the event. And so that's the thing, when you're tying in purpose, you want to cut the fat on some things, because sometimes people are doing perceived value in their mix with what your purpose is. But if that has nothing to do with your purpose, you might want to cut the fat, cut the middleman, and just have it come straight to you. And there's ways to do that as well. But that's why that's one of the first things that I like to talk with clients about, is making sure that we are talking about your purpose. Even with having conferences and things like that, I oftentimes ask people, are you looking to make a profit? And some people look at me like I'm crazy when I ask that, but it's a very basic common question, because sometimes, even if it's a corporation, they're not looking to make a profit. Sometimes they want to provide this service to people and they're just looking to break even. They don't want to lose out on having this actual event, versus sometimes people are like, yeah, I definitely want to make a profit, but they're like, oh, I don't have to make a major profit. So when you start asking those elephant in the room questions, I like to call it, because people don't always like to answer them. But then when they realize where it's going, it's like, I'm glad we had that conversation, because there are things that help keep them on track, that, you know, it's a great bell and whistle, but like, I don't need it to operate the train situation. So that's some of the things that I help them sort through as well, that really they've done on their own, if they can actually narrow down the objective and purpose for their actual event.
Hmm, okay. And how long have you been in business?
Business a little over a year now. So fresh
Oh,
during the pandemic, fresh during the pandemic, having the nerve to
okay.
start an event-based business.
Well, so you're a youngin, you're a newbie. So
Yes,
you started during the pandemic. You
I
launched during
did.
the pandemic.
I did. I had things set up prior to the pandemic. And then the pandemic happened and I couldn't even go get my license. Like I got all of my incorporation things before the pandemic, but in terms of my business licenses and things like that, it happened during the actual pandemic. So yes, I am a newbie as far as business goes, but I am not new to business. I am a third generation entrepreneur. So it's in me, it's been in me for a long time. The idea was to start my business sooner and I got caught up in my career. We all do that sometimes. I got caught up in my career. It was comfortable. And I didn't go anywhere. And finally I took the leap and I did it and started my own company. But the interesting thing is, if I would have started my company when I originally thought that I might, it would have been a very different company.
Oh, how so? Can you talk about that?
When I originally started my business, because I do have a master's degree in hospitality management, I moved to Orlando. That's where I'm based out of. I moved to Orlando with the intent to go to graduate school as soon as I finished start my business. That was the goal. And so that business was going to be being a event planner and manager. So that was the goal. And I don't even know if I was going to be focused on corporate or not. Like when I think back on it now, I'm not sure because that was a long time ago. I'm not sure what I was looking to be focused on, but I was definitely going to be just outright event planner. And so now, because I've done years of training people, that focus has shifted, as well as working with a lot of my clients and educating them and seeing that light bulb moment for them happen. I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. So that's why it has changed a good bit for me, because I've had a chance to um, see what more the needs are around people and events. Because one thing that I did notice that I didn't know back then is that right now, a lot of administrative professionals are actually doing the work of event planning. And it's not something that they're always trained to do. Some of them are very blessed where they catch on quickly and they can make anything happen. And so some of them do, but there are others where that's not necessarily the case. And so they're in their positions where their bosses are like, well, you did the holiday party, we'll do this too. And they just keep piling on different events for them to do. And when you're working for a major executive in an organization, you're not going to say, I don't know how to do it, because your job could be on the line. So you just try to figure it out the best way you can. And what a lot of them were doing is they were actually send over information based on the way their boss provided it to them. So if they asked for a certain type of room set up, they just literally passed on what their boss said, but their boss may not be using the right terms. Their bosses, they don't really care about events. It's just like, oh, I think I need this, and we'll do whatever they say it do. And a lot of times these administrative professionals are not present for the actual event. They're just putting it together and they stay in the office and maintain the office. And so they don't see what's happening. They just know what their boss is telling them. So I had to learn, because that's what was actually happening. And so instead, I became an advocate for those administrative professionals, where I would talk through things with them to see if I can uncover certain things that will help them, as well as once their boss were actually on site and they would come into the room and say, I need X. And it wasn't on the information that we talked about previously. And I would literally say, it's on its way. Give us just a moment. Our team is coming with it. And I would run and go tell our team, get it, put it out there, then run back to that administrative professional and say, hey, this is what your boss asked for. This is what I think they really meant when they initially told you why. And so that way I developed a really good relationship with them. But that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to go into the training and education piece of it, so that these people have what they need. And it's not just them scrambling all the time to try to make some things happen.
Okay. All right. So, okay. Trying to think of what to ask you. All right. So, all right. So how does one request your services? So I'm a client. Hey, I want to put on a virtual conference for my employees. How do I do that?
Right. So what the process typically looks like is they can contact me through my website. I do have methods on social media as well, Facebook and LinkedIn. But my website is one of the main ways to contact me. And on the website, there's an opportunity to schedule a call. And it's considered a discovery call listed on the website. But basically, there is time, roughly about 30 minutes, that we have reserved that I will speak with you about what you're planning. And we talk about what that looks like for you so that I can, one, give you some guidance. There are times with people book a discovery call with me, and we're not at a point where it may be best for them to work with me. So I don't just take people's money. If I feel like there's more work that they need to do or some other suggestions, I do provide that information to them. So I leave from the call with basically homework for them and myself. And so I tell them if they're not prepared to work with me, what it looks like to be prepared, or if I just simply think it makes sense for them to work with a different other type of service, which I can't think of any case that I've actually recommended that. Most often it's either they're ready to work with me or not. They're usually clear about the services that I provide typically. And then from there, based on that information, I review that as part of my homework to decide what makes sense for that individual. If there's a recommendation where, for instance, they're on a limited budget and I have a workshop coming up that just makes sense for them to attend that, I will make that recommendation. But if it's something to actually work one-on-one, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and schedule during that phone call an opportunity for us to get on another call where I actually go through the proposal with them. So I do a live proposal. I go over that information. So if they have any questions, they can ask those questions. I can explain everything as we're going through it based on my recommendations of what they've asked for. And then, as well as if there's something that they absolutely just don't need, I actually take those things out. So we're updating that proposal as we're going through it. So at the end of that phone conversation, I can send them a fresh proposal. I know a lot of times people send one quote or proposal and then they need to tweak it. And it may be various variations and revisions of that proposal. So that way you have just the one clean version of the proposal. And then I set a time frame of when they think that they can respond to me by if they would like to move forward with it.
All right. All right. Ooh, ooh. All right. So so since you're a youngin, so where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Awesome. In 5 years, I see myself doing, of course, a lot busier because it won't be a pandemic. Like, and that may be a lot of people's thoughts, even outside of hospitality, but it's something like Zoom or a virtual platform because they are getting it all right now. But I see myself definitely being A lot more busy, but I look to expand my team. So right now, because I'm not someone that is based just out of Orlando in terms of business, my business is virtual. I can go anywhere. I have an upcoming conference this August that is in Dallas. I just finished an event. Just so happen to be here in Florida, but the client is in Tennessee. And those are in-person events that I'm talking about. I do virtual events all the time, and there are people that are all over, including outside of the US. So I do plan to continue that, but I do plan to also grow my team. Part of that growth would be career coaching in the industry of events. You can do a type of event and people will kind of like acting typecast you for that event, only that type of event. So let's just say, for instance, if you've done festivals and outdoor events and that's been your thing, that's just how you got started, but you want to go to weddings, people are looking at those individuals like, I don't know if your skills are transferable. Obviously, there are transferable skills. But what tends to happen is that different event types do have different skills that are associated with it. So I do plan to extend a coaching, career coaching opportunity for those individuals that want to go a different path, if they want to change the field, that the type of events that they're doing, or maybe they're just a newbie and they're fresh. They can come through a coaching program with me so that they can get the experience that they need. So I would utilize them on some of my actual events where I will oversee them, but they would get the chance to have real life experience, to put that down on their resume, as well as me coaching them on what type of experiences would be good for them to have based on the type of event profession that they want to have.
Okay. Okay.
So that's
And
that full circle training and teaching.
yeah, I see that. So just to go back to what you said earlier, do you, well, you're doing virtual, more virtual now because of the pandemic, but you were
Right.
doing in person before. So going back to the in person, were you going to meet your clients? Were they coming to meet you? How did that
So
work?
a lot of my meetings are virtual, very similar to what we're doing now. A
Yeah.
lot of my meetings with my clients are virtual. If it is a situation where I'm actually managing their event, so there are physical visits that usually come with that. For instance, if I'm doing a site visit for their venue, that is obviously something that I do in person because you have to touch, smell, and feel everything, use all of your senses with that. So I actually do go in to do that. And a lot of times the client accompanies me during those visits, as well as on-site management that I do as well. So it depends on the package that they're getting. If it's a training situation and they want to have me in person, we'll just put that as a part of the proposal. But if it's something that they're open to doing virtually and that works for their team, we could do that as well. So they do have both options.
And
But if
where are
I'm near you, I do try to make sure I reach out. So for instance, since I will be going to Dallas for an in-person event, I do have some potential clients in the area. So I usually reach out to them and touch base with them when I'm in town.
and where are you based out of?
I am based out of Orlando, Florida. So people are very familiar with events here typically.
So you have a lot going on in Florida, it seems like.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Definitely in Orlando. Orlando is arguably what city right now is leading the path with events. But Orlando has been a top contender for many years, right behind Vegas. Vegas has definitely been known for it. But Orlando does not just conferences. We do have a huge convention center, but that's one of the reasons why we get a lot of people in addition to the theme parks and all those other things. So Orlando does their thing. We've had uh what do you call it? NBA All-Star game here. We haven't had the Super Bowl though. That's like the only thing that we haven't had. But there've been a lot of larger events that's been associated with the city. So there's always a lot going on here. And just to be real, because we're talking about the pandemic, Florida and Texas were two of the first states to open up their states. And so they're reaping benefits financially because of it as it relates to events. Those organizations that are adamant about still doing events, you know, many of them are doing it very safely, but they're the two states that led the charge around it. And so that's where people are booking a lot of their events right now, because I know California just recently opened like fresh. So they've been missing out on a lot of opportunity for that they would typically get.
And has your business been affected um, by the recent changes in Florida?
My business, because it is virtual, it has been picking up, because it's all over. Now where people are going is Florida and Texas if they're doing an in-person event. And that's still the case now, even with other states and places opening up. I have a client that is like, we're going to Texas and then we're going to go to Florida. And that's like next year where everything is going to be open up anyway, but that's what they're planning, because these people, you know, these states have already started working out what it looks like to have safe events. So they have a track record that they can put along with it versus the newer states, even though, you know, they have been probably doing a lot of safety protocols, which is part of why they haven't been open. But people are going off of the information of, you've done it already, you know what you're doing. So that's what they're doing. And I mean, even Orlando, and it's something that I do try to take part in. Orlando had a conference as the very first event during the pandemic to show that you can have in-person events. And it was just for really the hospitality industry. People came from all over the US. There were a few international people that came to this event as well. And they had a virtual component for it, but they had this huge event to let people know that you can still do it safe and what it looks like, the technologies that are out there, the different things that you can do. So I do stay abreast on all of those things. And me being a certified meeting professional, I keep on top of all of my training and different certifications. So there's a lot of training out there about COVID protocol. And a lot of people think going to the CDC website is going to do the trick. And giving them the information that they need, because that's a service you can come to me for if you don't need anything else, if you need COVID protocol. So they're thinking that going to the CDC website is going to do what they need. The CDC is putting out typically information. They have more detailed information. You got to know where to look, but they're typically putting out information for the basic individual, the basic public, to understand, you know, what they're doing on their day-to-day lives. If you're going to the store, that type of thing. They're not talking about if you're enclosed in a building with hundreds of people or thousands of people. That is not, they're not supplying those recommendations. That's a whole different concept. There are so many different things that people don't think about from a logistic standpoint that you now have to be mindful of. Sometimes it adds more money to your budget. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just a different way of doing things. But that's a whole nother area that I feel like I have been dabbing in a little bit more with my business because of it. We'll see where everything lands with so many people getting vaccines and people having vaccine only events. So it's a matter of if they feel like with the vaccine, everything is fine and we can resume things exactly as we did pre-pandemic, or if they're also trying to put other conditions around it, or even having it open to non-vaccinated people, what exactly that looks like. But what I will say, as any organization or company that's having an event, you have to be mindful. You don't want a super spreader event. It is not going to look good on your organization or company for your reputation to be associated with a super spreader event. So definitely be mindful of those things and know when you need to take additional precautions.
All right. And let's talk a little bit about like the real world future. So what do you think is going to happen with now that the country is starting to open back up? What do you think is going to happen to this virtual event space? Do you think it's going
Sure.
to increase, decrease, stay the same? What do you think is going to happen?
Sure. It is going to stay. It's definitely not going away. It is going to stay. The technology advancements that have happened in less than a year is just astronomical at this point. And what people are finding when you do a digital based event, it depends on what type of package and how you're doing it, but there are so many things that are trackable, that are tangible for you to see and decide if you're having an ROI. It helps you with your metrics. And so essentially, they realize that they can't get that same type of data in person, as well as if you are more of a local company or organization, you now can reach beyond that geographic area. You can actually have people in other countries or other states tune in, which is a huge opportunity for a lot of organizations that they had not considered before. So those two main points, there are others, but those two main points are reasons why it is going to be around. It is not going to completely go away. Now, what I will say, what's going to happen in the process is people are going to have to figure out how to incorporate this. Some organizations are saying everything is going to be hybrid. They're going to have an in-person component and a digital or virtual component. The thing about that is it's rare that you can concentrate on just one. You almost have to have separate teams to, or at least roles set aside for each of those experiences, because they're different experiences. Because if you let somebody be in person, they're the keynote, and all you do is have a camera recording it, it is not going to be the same experience for those that are watching it. And so let's just remember, they still want a good experience. They still want their money's worth. So you got to figure out how to balance that. Because it will take typically two teams, that is an additional cost that most people have not accounted for with it. So I think what's going to happen is people are going to, one, figure out how to get people on their team trained up to do some of this in-house so they don't have to outsource everything to keep their costs down. I think two, if this is a thing moving forward, which I think it is going to be, especially for a lot of companies and organizations, I think that just like anything in technology, it costs an arm and a leg when it comes out. And then as time goes on, they figure out ways to cut costs and make it a lower price point for their clients. I think the same thing is going to happen in events. And there's flexibility out there. We're using Zoom today, but there's a lot that people do with Zoom. Truth be told, Zoom integrates with a lot of platforms. A lot of these platforms don't have streaming capabilities or that's not their wheelhouse of expertise. They may have better capabilities around exhibits and networking and things like that. And so things like Zoom is still going to be here to stay. And if you can leverage Zoom, you're going to cut down on your costs significantly if your team knows how to leverage that and knows what to do with it. But I definitely think it's going to be around to stay. And so I'm excited about what it's going to look like in the future. But I promise, me personally, I don't know about everybody else, I actually love the fact that I don't have to get a plane ticket and a hotel room for every event I want to go to, especially if it's like a 1-day event that's maybe 2 or 3 hours away and I don't have to drive those 2 or 3 hours. I can just plug in online and listen to the content that way. Yes, I love it. But it's going to change the overall look of events as well, because also with digital events, it's recommended to not have the same amount of time. So if you were doing a full day conference, you probably wouldn't do that the same amount of hours on the digital event. So people are going to learn to cut the fat of what's needed and think about the overall experience. So that's going to change a lot around it as well.
Okay. All right. So as you can imagine, you're not the only one doing what you do. So you have some competition. So what sets you apart from the competition?
So with my approach, it's a little bit different. Oddly, for the combination of services that I do, I don't know anyone that does this exact combination, which is good. I've seen it in other countries, but not necessarily here in the US. And so, what typically happens if you're training people in the US do courses. And they allow you to go at a self pace, but you don't usually have a lot of interaction with the instructor that started the course. So in my case, I'm able to customize something based on what you need. So it's tailored to the expertise of your team as well as the type of event that you're having. So that's one thing as far as the training is concerned. And then in regards to the actual management and consulting, as I mentioned, I'm very purpose and goal driven. So that's one of the things I definitely focus on and get my clients to hone in on, as well as making sure that those events are profitable. They're Black events. They're not in the red and going to be a financial drain to your company or organization. And that comes from a lot of analytical thinking with my background in chemistry. That's what I bring to the table with a lot of my management. I'm very logistical driven and analytical. And so that's not typically what the average event manager has. And something else I will add, because there's always confusion around this. There's a difference between an event professional that is a strategist or manager or planner. We go by many names. But there's a difference between a person that does management of events and logistics, as well as a person that designs events. So I think a lot of times people get that confused. Honestly, some people call themselves planners and they're designers. And just as a quick education on that, designers are those that come in and they can make your event look gorgeous. A lot of times, I don't want to just say theme, because the event managers can also work with theme, but they actually design the space to look like what it looks like. They will, we can still coordinate, a manager can still coordinate vendors to put that together, but typically these people do it themselves. They may outsource a few of those functions, but they do it themselves. They're more creatives than they are anything else, if that makes sense. And it's no knock to them, because they're great, and that is not my strength. But there is a difference between the two. And so a lot of them have picked up along the way some of the management skills to try to help out people, so that people didn't have to have more than one event professional working their event. But In terms of me, I would definitely say the analytical, logistical approach to focus on goals and objectives and staying in the black.
All right, awesome, awesome. All right, so we were coming to the end here. So, like I said in the beginning, you're an honorary sponsor of A Step Ahead. I usually ask my sponsors why they sponsored us, but since you're an honorary sponsor, I will ask you, why do you think education is important? And if so, well, I don't want to lead you, but tell me when you hear the word education, what comes to mind?
Well, for me, I come from a family of educators. So education has always been very important to me. And I actually believe it outside of the traditional sense. I have brothers and other family members that may not have gone to college per se, traditional four-year university. Maybe they've gone to a junior college or they took up a trade or things like that. I believe in getting training and enrichment. That's part of why my company does that first. That's what our focus is. I am an educator. I'm a hospitality instructor myself. So it's something I believe in. And I love when that light bulb moment happens when somebody just gets it. And it is so much that you can do when you find out why something is happening and how it happens. Those two together, you're just unstoppable when you can figure those things out. And so that's why education to me is important.
Great, awesome. And since we do represent a tutoring company, can you talk about the value of tutoring?
Absolutely. Tutoring, I used to do it, not for a very long time, but I used to do it. And I did it in math, which I feel is a subject that a lot of people try to avoid like the plague. It gives people anxiety for some reason. I love it, but that's not everybody's testimony. But what I feel it does is it allows you to have a personalized service that's tailored for your learning. So in my experience, typically when you're doing that tutoring, we're trying to see where that gap is so that we could just connect the dots. Sometimes it's not that you need to learn it from A to Z. Sometimes you have A through F and you really got the rest of it. You just have a small gap that we just need to connect. And so I think it allows somebody to take that personal time to go ahead and bridge that gap for you. And it just goes without a hitch a lot of times from there. You're able to go and tutor people sometimes after that. But it's a joy again to see that light bulb when it goes off for someone, but they're forever thankful when it happens. I think tutoring works for everybody. It's not about your intellectual abilities, like if you're smart or not smart. I think it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with just connecting that dot. Sometimes you need a little bit more help in a particular area.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that. All right, so where can we find you?
Sure. My website is www.catalysteventcoaching.com. You can also find me on Facebook as well as LinkedIn on the company pages, which are Catalyst Event Coaching. And I also have a group on Facebook that people are invited to join if you just want to get content around events and how to make your events better and different tips and tricks around event planning. And it's called Event Planning with a Purpose.
Okay, and that's
the Facebook
under that's
the
a Facebook
group.
Mm-hmm. All right, awesome. And of course, all this information will be provided in the description. All right, Miss Allen Lane, thank you so much for your time. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to interview with me.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And you have yourself a wonderful day.
You too.
All right, thank you guys. Signing off.
Bye.
Bye.